Okay, so just a little introduction, folks. Welcome to those that are here in person. For those of you listening as a recorded catch-up, the way we'll work it is last session, we looked at what I would call the predictable elements about human behavior. We looked at approach and avoid, emotion, and in particular, these core emotional concerns and how you can actually use them as a tactic to help you with shortcuts, make sense of emotion, your own emotion, but of others, and it can be used at home, socially, and at work. It becomes a very flexible tactic. At the end of the last session, we just touched on our unique bubbles, and I think that's a good place for us to start this time. We'll speak about our unique selves, a bit about listening, and then we'll come back to the part that we started last week's session with, and that is the challenging conversations. And for those of you that are on record, there will be gaps because any conversation and discussion that happens here will not be recorded, just for dignity and respectful purposes. But there'll be absolutely enough on the session that you'll be able to pick up plenty from. So thank you very much for joining us, whether it's live or record. So first of all, we'll pop onto the PowerPoint. And really, it is just a welcome back. Starting off where we left last week, it was really about bubbles. And I asked you to think the day that you were born into a unique, transparent bubble. And every single moment of your life, every moment of every day has shaped that bubble into where you are now. And at the moment, every single one of us, if you can visualize in our own transparent bubble, no one can ever be in that bubble with you. You are there on your own. It's yours in its entirety. But the good thing is we can see and we can hear through these bubbles. And where I'm going with this is that with 8 billion people on this planet, all having had a completely unique pathway in life, and that pathway and our experiences and the way that we're wired all shape what we value in life, what we believe in, what we need and what we want. And if we can think of that bubble, here we go, come off. If you can think of your bubble sitting in there, and everything you think of, everything you do each day is shaped by that bubble. Everything you've thought about today already is woven into what you value, what you believe in, what you need, what you want. And I can't remember if I mentioned breakfast last time or not, but we'll use that as an explanation. You know, if you think of, well, you know, who had breakfast this morning? You know, and did you have it because you needed it, physiologically needed that fuel? You had it because it was just a habit. You had it because it represented something differently. And I like to introduce my granddad to this. I mean, he's long gone now, but he was always sitting at his breakfast table at 6:30 in the morning with his tie, you know, collar and tie on. And that was nothing to do with the need for food. That was to do with self-discipline. It represented something different to him. Breakfast was more than breakfast. It was self-discipline, being able to get up in the morning, and it was, you know, it marked the start of his day. So it was deeper seated than just food. And then you have maybe the belief. And I've spoken to medical professionals who said, I believe, even though I don't want breakfast, I believe if I don't have it, you know, it's the only food that I'm going to have during the day. So I believe I have to have it there and then. Fitness professions, there's a different train of thought. Some people say breakfast is the most important food of the day. Others believe it's not. So there's a belief woven in there. And that's just breakfast. Everything is woven through these things. And this is where our communication begins to either get interesting and intriguing, or it actually gets annoying because people don't see things the way we see it. So that bubble that we're in shapes how we make sense of the world, which in turn shapes our communication. And that is also shaped by our willingness to be interested in other people's bubbles. And that is the crux of good communication or not. In our world, we were fully always had to think about, how does the other person see this? And I have a colleague called Richard Mullender, and he runs what he calls the Listening Institute in London. And it's again based on negotiation. And he said, no one ever influences through talking. They influence through listening. And he's absolutely right that unless we listen for the clues that, you know, as to how people tick, how can we ever really understand them? And how can we then influence? How can we let them see the world through a lens they're familiar with, but with a different edge? So that's where we go with values, beliefs, needs, and wants. Now, I separate them into different elements because somebody's deep-seated belief, really strong value, can actually be someone else's whimsical want, can actually be unimportant to someone else. And there might be occasions where we unintentionally hurt somebody's feelings just because we don't realize something's important to them. Sender, message, receiver, and that was on some of the challenges that we spoke about last week. When we say something to someone, we send it with our intention, with our perspective, but they receive it from theirs. So it means that there could be an inaccuracy in the way something is received, even though it was sent with a particular intention. That's all to do with bubbles. And therefore, becoming an effective communicator is all about trying to work these bubbles out. So how do we do that? I think I mentioned last week, we just touched on an example of it is, well, if I was to ask you to think of your best friend, folks, and actually write down a list of what is important to them in life. Your best friend, your soulmate, someone that you spend a lot of time with that you know pretty well. And you write all these things down of what's important to them, what they value, what they believe, what they need, what they want. You'll have quite a comprehensive list because you know them well. Then if I ask you to do the same with yourself, what you'll find is the reason you're friends, the reason that you're with each other is because you connect on something really important. So you might have differences, like one of you might be a bookworm and the other person might be into gym and running. Somebody might be a night owl, the other one's a morning bird. You might have differences, of course, but that's not what you connect on. You connect on the deep stuff, the values, the beliefs, things that matter to you really most in life. So if running up hills dominates like 12 hours of your day every day, it's really important to you. It probably means that you're going to connect to people who have a similar desire for hill running. But actually, most of us, it's sort of the integrity, the honesty, and that sort of thing that connects. So that's the first thing. We connect on our similarities. And if you can think of someone that you actually don't like, someone that you never want to be in a room with again, you'll find that your differences are what keep you apart. You don't find the connections with that person, you actually find the differences, and it fuels us to keep them apart, which brings in the approach and avoid things we were speaking about previously. So if you know someone well, you can probably work out how they tick, but what do you do when you actually don't know someone? You meet them for the first time. They're coming into your organization and they're joining the team for the first time, or you get an angry caller on the phone, or you're in a terse meeting and you don't actually know everyone there. Well, we'd have environments like that where we had to try and connect. We had to try and understand, connect, communicate with people we didn't know. That's where core emotional concerns come into their own, but also we need to know how they tick. Because the idea that if we can work out what is important to them in life, we'll find the connectors for us to have that approach. And we will also find the stuff that allows us to actually move things forward and towards influence as well. But the big thing is you become kind and considered communicators. So we can do that in about 3 minutes. That's about how long it takes to grab the essence of someone, enough to connect and start a conversation. And we started on that last week when I said, an example of it. And I'll still use an example because I'm conscious we only have 2 hours today and time is tight. I'd like you now to think of your best holiday, or maybe a perfect day. Just think about it yourself. And if you were to jot down what that would look like. And you'll have probably a little bit of a shopping list. Friends, family, sunshine, outdoors, no alarm clock, no work, or maybe work, never know. You'll have that list, and that's your first layer. And what we would do with people we encountered was effectively just engage them in chat. And as soon as they start talking, they will give clues about what's important with them, and we'd speak about that first layer. Now, because they brought the subject up, we are entirely comfortable about asking things from what they've shared. So it doesn't come out of our head. It's not our agenda at that point. It's actually all about them. So now I'd maybe say, you mentioned sunshine, you know, as being a really important part of the holiday. Do you mind me asking what that's about? Now, I might actually say at that point, to connect, actually, sunshine and holidays is my bag too. That's all I'll say, because I don't want to steal the conversation. But suddenly you know that you're dealing with someone who's got a similarity, and that in theory allows us to connect, even if it's just a little. Next, tell me about the sunshine. Well, you know, sunshine in my bones, it makes me feel good, it makes me feel alive and free. Even just take that one line, alive and free. It's a positive feeling. It's filling their buckets. What is it about freedom? And suddenly you'll get, well, I don't like having to always be, you know, at the beck and call of other people. I like the freedom and having time to me and a glass of wine when I want. And suddenly freedom and being carefree becomes a very strong need, maybe even a value. And the belief that they don't have it very often, the belief that that's something special and not a routine thing. And then you could go in another layer and just say, you know, ask them about freedom. You know, what is it? You know, do you think everyone should have that freedom then, or what is it? Freedom's a big thing that's coming out here. Tell me more. So you can see that we would explore the layers. Now that seems a little bit maybe contrived. But effectively what I'm saying is, you know, you start with one layer, you go to the next and you go to the next, and you dabble around these three layers about what's important to someone. And the words we would use is appropriately curious. Now that appropriateness means that we need to feel comfortable about these conversations. So have we all been, you know, on a train journey or a plane or something, sitting next to someone, and all you say is hello, and then the next thing you know all about them? You have their medical history, every argument they've had, you know, and it's just too much. It's no longer appropriate. It's oversharing, and we feel, oh, I need to cut them off. And that's what I mean by appropriately curious. It's got to sit okay with us. And a good way to do that is simply asking somebody about the things they're sharing with you and letting them know that you connect and that you're interested, not interrogative, just genuinely interested. And that usually works. And you'll get the feeling when enough is enough. Now, if, and again, in context, Shauneen, if you and I were best mates and we're sitting in a little wine bar, you'll notice I say wine bar today rather than coffee bar. I don't know what's going on with that, but I can live with that. You and I are sitting in a wee wine bar, Shauneen, and you're just suddenly pouring your heart out about how, you know, tough a day you've had and maybe personal issues. Now, you and I are best friends. It would be entirely appropriate for me to keep that conversation going, wouldn't it? Genuinely interested. Yeah, that's appropriate curiosity because I've earned the right. I'm a close friend. Oh, tell me more. Oh, I know what that's like. Oh, my word. And before you know it, you might actually have a very familiar conversation, a very maybe even intimate conversation. There's that trust, that affiliation we spoke about with core emotional concerns. But take that same thing into this environment, Shauneen, it would not be appropriate to go there, would it?
No.
So appropriate curiosity, and I cannot say there's a formula for appropriate. It's a feeling, and it's about reading yourself and reading other people. And there'll be days where some people will open up a little bit more and other days where they won't. But in amongst it, we're listening for the clues that tell us what's important to them, listening for the clues that we can connect on. So when someone is speaking to us, what is it that we're paying attention to? And I'll come on to specific listening at the moment. But what can I go back to? Well, here's one thing that we would think of is the first thing that someone says to you is either the most important to them or the easiest. So maybe even a member of staff comes in and, you know, is upset or angry, and they spout off about something that seems completely irrelevant to the office environment. Well, it's relevant to them because it's either the easiest or the most important. And we would never, even if someone was speaking about something that was completely irrelevant to the context that we were in, we would encourage that conversation because we give clues about what matters to us with everything we say. So we would never divert it. We'd practice at trying to bring it round, and the timing of that is essential. But at the moment, what I'm trying to coach is just run with whatever conversation they want. Tell me more about that. Where does this go? And eventually you can actually say, and how does this fit into, you know, what we want to discuss today? So ultimately, the first thing someone says is important. The next is that when someone's telling a story, they might actually get really animated about something. So it's as if they're, they're coming along in just a nice little balance, and suddenly there's an emotional peak or an emotional drop. Well, that would be something we would explore, because that means something to them significantly, that their emotion has changed. Something else we might pick up on is really unusual comments. And I was speaking to a group the other week, and I'm going to try and get this exactly as they said it. And it was exactly this sort of thing. We're speaking about what things mean to each other. And they said, when I walk into that team, it's like, what was it? Peace and quiet on a platter of calm. I had never, I mean, what does that even mean? But it was so something unusual that I think we'll have to go there, because I have no idea. They're seeing it in a very unusual way. So if somebody comes out with a really unusual description, grab that one, because there's always a story. Another one, if somebody ever says interesting, there is always a story behind interesting. What do you think about the new setup in the office, David? Interesting. Don't let that one go. Your mum says, what do you think of my new suit? Oh, interesting colour, mum. There's a story behind interesting every time. Dignity is your barometer as to whether you want to explore that word, but that one we would catch as well. And then, of course, the things that you connect on. If you can connect on something. So you actually have a whole selection of things that you can go in to keep that conversation running. Now, I've talked for about 10 minutes, and I've got a little extra bit to add on to that, but I think now's a good time to ask any questions on anything that I've said there that needs a different explanation, or anyone wants to contribute with. Are we okay? Okay. The next part then is the layers. Do you get what I mean by the layers? We just dabble around exploring the things that folk are saying, and each time you go into a layer, you'll get a little bit more of what really matters to that person. Within negotiation, we had a psychology team that worked alongside us, and they said layers are good, but don't go too far, and never go to the 7th layer. The 7th layer is the scary stuff, because you take someone back to points in their time when maybe they've even had trauma. And they said, even we don't go there. You just don't want to go to the 7th layer. So I always held that with a bit of fear. And there's only a few deployments that I've had where we really did have to dig particularly deep with people, but not without that psychology support saying this is the right thing to do. So if you think of it, all we're trying to do here is become very good communicators to try and open people up so we can understand them, that we can find the reasons to connect on rather than disconnect, and to start a really good discussion about understanding their perspective in their bubble. So it's a bit of an investment. That's all we're doing, these few layers, dabbling around in them. And there we go, that is layers. Now I'll come back to that in some of the explanations later on to bring it to life, but that's the principle. We are all different. And if you're really trying to connect, communicate, understand someone, we have to understand how they tick. And to do that, we need to be appropriately curious. And sometimes when I ask teams, what would you class as something challenging? Conflict often comes up. I don't like conflict. I shy away from conflict. I said, well, 8 billion people on this planet, all in different bubbles. Is it fair to say that we have to be able to disagree? What do you think? Are we agreed on that one, folks? Yeah, we need to be able to disagree with people. We have to, because we see the world in so many different ways. And the way we see it is actually the way that works for us. So it's important that we are open to disagreement and that we can disagree. Now, the difference between disagreement and conflict is appropriate curiosity. Conflict, in my thought, is a choice. People are choosing to fight over the differences here rather than be appropriately curious. And it's okay when we realize that and we can think, well, I wonder why on earth why even the things that are way off the mark. And in negotiation, there were a lot of that, especially, I mean, I maybe mentioned the ISIS case that I dealt with. It does not make sense to us as to why someone would want to behead someone else for a political cause. And it's so nothing they will ever say will make me agree that that's a good thing. But I have to understand why they think it is. Because if I don't understand why they think it is, I will never find the little clues that I can use to try and get them to see things slightly differently. So I can either conflict and fight. Where's that going to get me? And by being interested in them, you hope that they're interested in you. Now, that was a good example as far as conflict and how easy it is for people to want to fight. It's not a good example in that it was a one-way conversation, wasn't it? But you get the idea. If you have someone who chooses to fight with you, who chooses to argue, then that is them with a complete lack of willingness to understand your perspective. So what can you do to bring them round? They might not even realize it. And if we think of why do people say what they say and do what they do? Because they can and because it works. If you have somebody who immediately wants to fight, then conflict, the chances are it's a tried and tested method that they always use and they always get what they want. And therefore, it's a tried and tested strategy that works. They're never going to change that until it doesn't work for them or they're not able to do it. So sometimes people who are complete warriors, it's quite handy to say, where is the fight in getting us? I hear that you feel very strongly about what how you see things. And I feel strongly about mine, but I'm not going to fight with you. I am prepared to try and understand where you're coming from, though. And I think that's quite a good thing. So without shouting, can we go over this and try and get them on side and maybe even just open their eyes to the fact that they are conflicting out of choice, conflicting out of habit. And it's not going to get them anywhere with you. Easier said than done, because it's not a nice feeling to have somebody being aggressive. And yeah, that's simple as that. The difference between disagreement and conflict is appropriate curiosity. It's as simple as that. If we're genuinely interested, the conflict can die, and it saves it becoming an avoidance. It turns it into an approach. Okay. Right. Are we doing okay? I'm talking a bit more than I would normally like to. I'd like to go into listening now, and we will do a little bit of a demonstration with this. So I'll maybe ask someone to help me with it. But I'll bring the slides up first of all. This slide just covers sort of the questions we asked for that appropriate curiosity, and they're not the be all and end all. You'll have your own ones that you use. Tell, explain, describe is quite a handy one. We used to speak about having TED in our pockets. And when somebody's explaining something, and we'll just take it to the holiday again, but it could be anything, maybe a new way of working or a new policy that's coming in. Open questions are good. The where, what, why, how, when. We were conscious within policing, especially if they connected negotiators to police, that as soon as a police officer asks a question, people are guarded. So we try to remember the approach and avoid. That would make them want to avoid us. So we found that TED worked really well. It didn't sound as interrogative. Would you mind telling me more about that? Explain how that works for you. Describe that to me, because I can't visualize it. And that actually became quite a good phrase, 3 things to be able to use. Of course, questions are your friend, but they're only your friend if they're the right questions. Asking someone how they feel about something should bring an emotional response. Why does that matter to you? Should bring a response that lets you have an insight into what's important to them, their values, beliefs, needs and wants, as does, what does that actually mean to you? What does it mean to you having a different way of working? What does it mean to you having an 8 o'clock start in the morning? And it then brings in again the bubble stuff. If you are ever dealing with someone or something that's a little bit terse, for example, I think maybe I used a coffee cup last week. Yep. Somebody, Alison, I leave a coffee cup in the sink and you get all angry at me for it. And we end up having a bit of a set to over it. Well, if you think of it, we could go through the layers there and say, what's the story with the coffee cup? Well, you always leave it in the sink. But that leaving it in the sink, how come that's a trouble? Well, it makes it, it makes you look lazy, and it makes me feel this way. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. excuse me. And we can go through the layers, Alison, of why this coffee cup matters. But actually, I could cut to the chase. So this is where the emphasis comes in. And I might say, Alison, I left a coffee cup in the sink and I can see you're angry of it. What's that really about? What's really going on here? And you can actually ditch a layer or two and get right to the matter. So if somebody's really angry about something that's happened within the office, and you say, look, I can tell it matters to you. What's this really about? Because I don't think it's just about bits of paper being left on a desk. And therefore, you're almost giving people permission to speed things up. Asking someone to be specific is helpful. Asking them what it's really about is helpful. And also saying, like, out of all of this, there's a lot going on here. What would make you feel better immediately? And then that will lead you to the source of the issue as well. So that's just a few questions. The important thing is creating your own versions so it sounds natural coming from you. So take any of them you wish, mold them into something that suits you. And that's basically our little appropriate curiosity bubble. This is replicated in your workbook, folks. The task, I'm going to ask you to take that one away, is just have a conversation with each other. In your workbook, I think, can't remember, maybe page 9-ish, there's a whole load of conversation starters, and it's quite nice if somebody starts a conversation and just try and explore the layers with them and see where it goes. I tried this out as, I did it at work anyway, formally, but for a practice, I asked my husband to do it. So you can imagine we've been with each other forever, and he's going, really? Don't we know everything about each other? And it was joyous, and it ended up being a fun evening, and I learned things about him from childhood and that, and it was a nice thing to do. So to practice that, exploring the layers, folks, take that one away, and in whatever environment you want, just, I'm going to say grab a wine, okay, grab a coffee, grab time, a walk in the park, and just say, I want to try something that I learn on a course. And I'm going to just ask you something about, if you ruled the world, what's the first thing you would do? And then that's your first layer, and then take it another layer and take it another layer and just see where that conversation goes. Okay, so the next part, listening. Negotiators are experienced police officers. So when they come into the training, it's always a thing of, you're going to teach us to listen. For goodness sake, I've been listening forever and things. But there's actually a little bit of a knack to it. And has anyone here ever had additional training and maybe done reflective listening or are aware of active listening skills and things like that? So anything like that been ever shared with you? And they're all great. Reflective listening works really, really well, but it takes forever. And if you have someone who's skilled at it, it's a joy to hear. But if they're not skilled at it, it can make you feel like they're just being a parrot. The idea is that they simply reflect back what you're telling them. And then it goes back to you, and then you build on that. And eventually the person themselves who's talking will talk themselves around to solutions and things without getting any advice from the other person, but it can take a long time. So I'm not dismissing any of this. The type of listening I'm going to coach you on is exactly what I shared with negotiators, and it's a time saver. And you can use it in a number of areas as a tactic to help you save time, help move conversations on, help redirect them. And that was within our list of challenges as well. How do you get a conversation around to what you need to be when time is tight? Listening in this way will help. Can I ask anyone here shop with a shopping list? You do, Anita. Lorraine, you do. Lorraine, what does that benefit? What does that bring to you? What's the benefit of it? And you'll need to come off mute.
Absolutely nothing, Cathy, because I write it and then I don't look at it. And then I go around the shop and forget.
So there's a theory there, though. What's the theory of that then, Lorraine?
I don't know. I have to investigate that further.
Anyone have a list that they use and it works for them? No? Oh, you do. Louise, what's the benefit that brings to you?
Sometimes if I'm trying to get more healthy, I find a shopping list is really beneficial because it really focuses what I'm going to cook. Sorry, my mic's up on the air. It's going to focus on what I'm going to cook. It's very planned and organized, and I'm not tempted to go outside the shopping list, to veer off, to kind of maintain that. And it's quite often very linked to trying to be more active and more healthy at
Oh, I
times,
like-
different times in the year.
Fair enough. It's now one of them, usually after Christmas, isn't it?
Yes.
So what we have is when we have a shopping list, when we go shopping, it's time efficient. It is efficient as far as getting the stuff you need, getting home and discovering you have everything you need. It saves you money, and yeah, it keeps you on track. And if you shop without a list, anyone who shops without a list, have you ever come home and thought, where's the eggs? That's what I went in for in the first place. I've got plenty of other stuff in my basket, great treats, but I forgot the eggs, blooming egg. And it's the sort of same with listening. If you know what you're listening for, it makes listening very effective. If you browse listen, you might pick up the eggs, but you might not. So if you browse listen, you might pick up the important things, but you might not. So we ask the negotiators to consider what they're listening for when they're listening to someone. And we all know there is a difference between listening and hearing. Listening to respond is what we do most of the time. Listening to understand is trying to understand somebody else's perspective, their bubble, and that brings benefits. So we would, going back to that slide, we'd ask them to listen for three things. Number one is the information. What is the stuff you're hearing? The times, the dates, the places, the the facts, the figures, the things that are never going to be argued. Number two, the emotion. What is the emotion that you're picking up from the other person? Is it positive? Is it negative? And also, what's the intensity? Because remember, the intensity of the emotion dictates how well someone else's ears work. So the higher they are emotionally, you already know that they're going to hear very little from you, and that's your time not to talk, it's to listen. So we listen for the emotion and the intensity of emotion. And then the last one is the clues that tell us what is important to someone, the values, beliefs, needs, wants that we've spoken about today. Now, these arrive in the form of judgment, comments, opinions, things that matter and mean something to someone. And that's the layer that is actually we sometimes miss in listening, mainly because we also have opinions and we want to give our own opinion rather than listen to the other person's. So that's the bit, that's the hurdle. Most people can listen and hear the information and they can pick up emotion, but it's actually the next part that is difficult, yet it is the most important. So we'll have a little try of that, and I'll try and explain what that looks like. Anyone would be okay to work with me on this? I'm not going to embarrass or make you feel awkward or anything, but anyone up for just trying this out with me? I'm just going to ask you to reflect back what I'm saying. Volunteer? There, Vincetta, thank you. Vincetta, that's correct pronunciation again, isn't it?
It's close enough, Cathy.
Oh no, right, tell me, so I really want to get it right.
It's totally fine, Vincenta.
Vincenta, with it turns the E is more of an I, right? Vincenta.
Right, that's it.
So I'm going to say something to Vincenta, and all I'm going to ask her to do is to repeat the information. So that's the factual stuff that can never be argued. If I say, Vincenta, I want that report on my desk by Tuesday, please. What's the information?
Report desk Tuesday.
Perfect. So we have that. That's not an issue.
Yeah.
The next part is the emotion. So I'm looking, what is the emotion and what's the intensity? And you can do a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being, hey, I'm laid back, chilled, nothing matters. 10 being about to explode. Vincenta, I need that report on my desk by Tuesday, please.
I'd say an 8.
Extra layer. Go on, sorry.
I'd say an 8 or on the higher scale.
Okay, so a little bit high. And what is the emotion you're hearing?
Just a bit exasperated, impatient. I've been asking for this 10 times, and now you're kind of saying, this is the final, I really want it, I need it now. You know, I've given you enough leeway.
Okay, so that's making sense from our own bubble, that's actually that underlying emotions telling me a story. Now, you might be right, might be wrong, but yeah, you're right. There is frustration and annoyance and urgency within there. And I am, the seesaw has gone from here and it's up a bit. So that's fine with the first two layers. Now, the next part is where you get the opinions and the judgments coming in. I'll go, Vincenta, I need that report on my desk by Tuesday, please. And I don't mean Friday. I know what your department's like, but it's timekeeping, for goodness sake. Now, the throwaway remarks, folks, are the ones that jar with us, and we want to quite often fight or flight them. It stops us listening, yet they hold really important nuggets of how someone ticks. So genuinely, what would you want to, or how would you feel if you had a remark like that, Vincenta?
So on a remark like that, I try to say to myself, Vincenta, that's a hook.
Yes.
Unhook yourself from that. I actually see a hook in my chest. Unhook yourself from that, because that's about them, their communication. It has nothing got to do with you. So I'm happy in my working style that I've competent. And so I try to talk to myself like a toddler and say, you're doing well. You've got your work sorted, and try to ignore that because this person's trying to hook you in. That's what I try. I'm working on myself. That's what I think that I should do in this situation.
Vincenta, that works beautifully into influence. We speak about hooks as well. It's exactly the same word. And people's hooks are their bubble, what they value, believe, need, and want. And actually, that's really quite a nice connection, because what's happening there is it's their values, beliefs, needs, and wants coming out in dialogue that is then hooking you. I like this. Thank you. I may use that. But what we have is somebody almost insulting you, isn't it? They're giving an opinion and you're throwing it at you. Anyone else feel that the hairs on the back of their neck would go up and you go, you cheeky mare, don't talk about your department being all great. I don't remember you being super efficient the last time I asked for something, you know, and these sort of feelings quite naturally come up because we try to balance the books. If somebody's kind, we're kind back. If somebody is hostile, we want to be hostile back, but we'll have coping mechanisms and we'll learn. And that's through great experiences that you've got that coping mechanism. And wow, that is such a good one to have. It'll leave you open to hear so much easier. So what we have then is these values, beliefs, needs, and wants. So if we dissect that, what do I believe about you and your department then, Vincenta?
That, well, I don't know whether you actually believe that or you're trying to just start me off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know, you know what I mean? So, but it sounds as if you think I'm lazy or that I'm incompetent, and that incompetence is a culture within the within my department. Yeah.
And that's the hint that we're getting. And remember, when people speak, they give clues about what's important to them. And they're clues because we're making sense of it from our own bubble. And again, there are some things that are really obvious that are never misunderstood. If somebody says, you know, why can't people be honest? Well, actually, we know they need honesty. They want honesty. So that's non-negotiable. There's no ambiguity about that. But the other stuff we're making sense of. So yeah, you're making the best guess, really. But what you think is, Cathy believes she's not going to get this report in time unless she acts that way. She believes that, just exactly as you said, that maybe there's a culture of not, you know, delivering on time. What do you think I value? And again, this is you making a stab at it from your bubble.
So with someone like this, and again, I'm obviously transferring this to an experience with someone like this. Sometimes they're looking for the conflict, you know, sometimes they're looking for the rise. And it's not about the report, it's about perhaps your working relationships. Perhaps they want to own more of you or have more, sort of, it's like almost like making you more inferior and them superior to you. Sort of, there's a dynamic there going on. For this, obviously, they're just trying to make sure that I have the report on time, but they're doing it from, it's like you'd said, this is how they operate. This is how they speak. So they probably speak to lots of people like this, but effectively they're saying, I want the report by this time. And I think as well, I wouldn't be able to, I'd be put in a position where even if I had a difficulty, say childcare difficulty, or I wouldn't be able to negotiate back with them. Well, listen, you know, I have a difficulty with Friday, but I'll get it to you for Monday. You know, there's no negotiation there with that person.
No, there is none. And in fact, if they're high, if they're up on 8 on the scale, they're not going to hear any comments you have anyway.
No.
So what we have there then is the 3 layers of listening. We have the information, which is report desk Tuesday, the emotion, which is urgency and a bit of frustration woven in, and the seesaw's high that they'll hear something you say, but they're not going to hear big explanations. And then lastly, they're given hints, clues that they believe that your department won't deliver on time. They have to believe that it's okay for them to act that way, or they wouldn't be acting that way. They probably value time efficiency and having reports, being able to flip the fingers and get things done. The need and the want is there in terms of, I need that report. So what we have then is 3 elements that we've heard. Now we have to show that person that we've heard, understood, respected them. Now, even if they're a bit of an ass, remember, everybody operates from their own bubble. So they must think that behaving that way in that moment, it makes sense to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. I'm not saying it's right for you or right for anyone else. And I'm also not saying that you have to absorb aggression or rudeness from anyone, not for a minute. But the smart thing is to pick your time. If you really want that to stop, then the time to address it is maybe not in that moment where they're not listening and they have other things on their mind. So what we would use is to show someone that you've heard them and do it in quite a quick way is simply to take a little bit from each of these bubbles and reflect it back. And you might not even need all 3. And this can be as creative as you wish. And I might say, Vincent, I might say to that rude Cathy, okay, I hear you, you want the report on your desk. Tuesday is the limit. I get the frustration, and I also sense you don't have full faith in my department. That would capture a bit of everything. Now, it depends how high she is, because she might not hear that. You might need a quicker explanation. Report Tuesday, and I get it, it's urgent. That's not lost on me how you feel. Something like that might be enough. Or you could actually be more creative and say, oh, somebody who has time standards like myself. You're immediately given, you're paraphrasing something from that values, beliefs, needs and wants. Hey, Cathy, somebody who has time demands like myself, you've come to the right person. I get it. It'll be there on your desk by Tuesday. No need to be worried about it. So you can just take a little snippet from that behavior and what is said and reflect a little bit back. It's good if you can do all 3, of course, but you actually don't need to. What we've learned is that sometimes it's enough just to do the emotion. Sometimes it's enough just to capture a little bit of that 3rd bubble. And the information becomes the least important to anyone. They actually want to know what you feel and that you've had that recognized. Linda, go for it.
I'm just wondering, any hints for if it's not going to be on their desk by Tuesday?
Yeah.
So it's an unreasonable request, and how you respond to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In that moment, they need to know that you've heard them. Now, you can actually bring that in, because by referring to Tuesdays, the work that I have, Tuesday's not possible. And it might just be to the point, or I hear you, I'll give you a call in half an hour. Something along these lines. I'll see what I can do and I'll call you in half an hour. So, by all means, don't promise that at all. But that time, that place is it might be the right time to say, depending on the emotion, depending on how receptive they're going to be. But at the moment, I'm thinking they already think bad of me. And I need to think about how I'm going to say this. And one of the challenges that was on the list is the corridor encounters where you're caught on the hop, and it might be something here, for example, you're not expecting this, you've not planned it, and now somebody's asked you to reprioritize and you can't do it. It's an emotional moment for you because it's spontaneous. Anything you can do to give yourself just even a few seconds of breathing space so you don't answer under your own emotion is worthwhile. So we can think of a little tactic for that later on. There's not a 2 and 2 equals 4. There's actually options out there that you can use. But at that moment, in that moment, that Cathy needs to know you've heard them. So the way to do it, yeah, I hear you, you want it on Tuesday. I'll be in touch about that. But I sense that it matters to you and the frustration involved. So leave it with me. I'll give you a shout just in 10 minutes. And then maybe the seesaws have come down a bit. You've had a little bit time to think, and then you can follow up. That's a suggestion if that option is available to you. But I'm going to speak about spontaneous and planned, and how to use emotion to make it work for you. And what do you do when you're, when you're stuck on the spot and you have to respond there and then? And I'll come back to that as well, Linda. Is that okay as an answer for you at the moment?
Oh, yes, thank you. Because I probably would find myself in that situation being a wee bit defensive and reacting probably without taking a breath or some time out. So yes, it is helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm asked, well, do I need to think and get all this layered stuff going on? Do I need to dance around the handbags when I'm speaking to people? And the answer is no. Dignity is your barometer for everything. And if, do you know people within your organization that actually the way they communicate is quite harsh? They'll be quite cutting with each other. And you might actually be one of those people who can be cut to the point, no flowery stuff, get it done. And what do you mean you won't get it done on Tuesday? Get your backside into gear. Now, if dignity prevails, because that's the way that they speak with each other and they don't take anything adverse from it, and it works, then keep it going, because that's inadvertently chosen communication style that works for them. But it won't work for everyone. And it's the dignity that's the barometer. If what I'm about to say is going to undermine us, why would I say it? So I hope there's something in there as well. So that's what we have for listening, folks. And we need to know that we're heard, understood, respected. And that's a quick way of showing someone that you've heard them. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to comply with what they're asking, but they do need to know that you've heard them, the main points. And that's a quick way of doing it. Now, another thing is that being able to, that's effectively a summary as well. When someone says something to you, being able to summarize it back. And it's when if you're writing a paragraph on a page, is it fair to say you put a full stop when you're finishing a sentence? And then that full stop allows you to start a new sentence on the same subject, or a new paragraph or on a different subject, or close the book altogether. And that's what that type of listening response allows you to do as well. It's effectively a summary. Okay, what you're saying is this, 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 and this. I've captured it. Now you have control of that conversation, and you can then direct the next thing you say to your own agenda. You can then say something about the same subject. You can then divert it to a new paragraph, or you can say, okay, I hear you. That's it for now. So this becomes actually quite a handy time-saving tactic to move conversations to where you need them to be as well. That's us on listening. Any thoughts, questions? And I'm thinking, we're conscious of a cup of tea as well. It was 10 that we started, got 5 minutes, and then we'll get a leg stretch. Any thoughts, questions, and anything there, folks?
There's one question in the chat box there, Cathy.
Back to what you were saying about the interesting, the use of the word interesting. Joan was asking, what would a good response be to that without sounding negative?
I just repeat the word. I reflect the word itself. So Anita, can you give me a sentence just with interesting in it? I'll just maybe ask you, what do you think of the new timetable that we're organising for the office?
Well, I think it's very interesting, Cathy.
Interesting. I'd just use interesting. Yeah, interesting. Or I'd use Ted. You mentioned interesting. Okay, that can be anything to anyone. What do you mean by that? Help me with that. Well, interesting to me means something good. Tell me more. So it sort of links in with the natural way you speak, and you don't have to always make it negative. And if you feel it'll be taken negatively, and so you can actually say, interesting is, can mean many things. I'm just keen to know what it means to you. Something along these lines, would that work? You can practice it actually. How many different ways to say, to ask about interesting? That's Joan, is that a word that's used a bit?
No, just I know a particular person, and quite a lot. She would use it quite a lot in conversation when people are talking, and she just nods her head and goes, interesting.
Oh.
Interesting. She says this in a group.
Yeah,
yeah.
There could be a
and
thing
it always
that
sounds like,
there's always a story. There's always a story behind
yes,
interesting.
there's a story behind it. Yes.
Or it's a habit word, we all have habit words, don't we, that we just lean on. We
Yes.
say, and I mean, I probably don't even know half of mine, but you will, because you'll be sitting there going, God, how often does she say that? And it's not until someone highlights it to you and you think, oh, so I do. So it could be a habit word that just fills a gap to keep a conversation going, or actually, but if it's used with that pace, pitch and tone, I'm thinking there's a story there.
Yeah.
So you can
there's
do it with
definitely a story
intrigue
there.
and say, interesting, there's a story there. Come on, spill.
Yeah.
But again, dignity, is it appropriate? Is it when you're in, you know, in amongst other people? Then perhaps not. If it's a one-to-one, it might be. But it's all about just open, transparent conversation that you know where you stand with people, and it's helpful. So there we go. Perfect. When we come back, we're going right into your questions, and I have a few tactics that I think might be helpful, and then we'll come back to them at the end, have specific chats just in case there's any missing gaps. But I think it's probably quite a good time to have a cup of tea. So a leg stretch, would 5 minutes do it? I'm just conscious with 2 hours, we don't have tons of time to take big breaks. So just 5 minutes, top up the coffee, leg stretch. It's just 2 minutes to the hour, even make it 5 past. That work? Perfect. And I'm going to stop the record now. Okay, if we pick back up then, this is a capture of the challenges we spoke about last week, and I sort of grouped them. Don't know if they're in perfect groups, and some of them might, you know, merge into another. But this is sort of what we said last week. So in terms of emails, there was a few things there. The ease of using email against the overload of getting too many of them, the wrong interpretation, and that comes back to the bubbles, doesn't it? When what you say is what you intend, and then it's taken the wrong way, it's taken a way that's unhelpful. Well, that'll happen even if we're face to face, because we'll live in our different bubbles. And as soon as you remove any element of effective communication, so remove the visual, remove the audible, and all you're dealing with is written work, well, actually, there will be a misinterpretation of it. And it's a matter of, well, what can I do to try and limit how this will be wrongly received? I'll go into these in a little bit more detail later on, but that was just one example there. You know, what is it when you get no response? And then group emails, the issue around there. Timing. Well, we're going to talk about timing just shortly, but compassion, you want to have compassion, but actually time is against you. How do you find that balance of both, especially when you want to do is the compassion element, so you're actually on the same page as the other person, and time is the thing that's getting in the way. Time constraints in general, how it impacts on communication, how to get to the point when the time is right. Well, actually, that's your listening tactic. Demonstrate that you've listened. Okay, I hear you say this is important, that's whatever. Now, you know, moving on, but there's also another thing called signposting, and we're going to come to that. And then the corridor questions, which is the emotional one. Others' reactions, shaping feedback as a positive action to keep people on side rather than negative. And that might be that as soon as you say you're going to give feedback, the culture and that word represents negative stuff. So it's how do you change that idea and have a conversation in advance. Different interpretations, that sender, message, receiver again. How to motivate others and encourage an open mind, which sort of goes with that first one to a degree. Dealing with aggressive and how to be assertive. And actually, Vincinta, you've already given a tactic there that works for you that might actually be lovely to have shared, because other people can maybe take it on there to deal with aggression. And also we've spoken about the difference between conflict and disagreement. Is that appropriate curiosity? The assertive part we'll come back to. When someone's out of line and inappropriate, how do you deal with it? The white noise, all these distractions, which actually are the things that get in the way of listening. Systems. So you are perhaps feel stuck with a system that doesn't serve you well, and you end up, rather than being able to go straight to the person to speak about it, you have to go through a middle person. And negotiation, we had to do that a lot with what we call TPIs, third-party intermediaries. We'll speak about that. Technology and abbreviations, help or a hinder, and I think I've got a quick answer for that one. And just the volume of information. How to share learning, how do you open up people's mind to that they've got something positive to share? My experience is going back from a course and saying, wait till you hear what I learned, is an immediate off-putter. People going, no, please don't come with new ideas. My brain can't take any. and the fear of being misunderstood. So this is sort of what I'm looking at now. I'm going to go through a few tactics, and then at the end we'll come back to discuss them in detail. And it's at that point that we'll put the filming off so we can actually get in about them. I realise some people who maybe highlighted some of these questions aren't here today. And what I will say is, if you feel there's not enough for you in the 2 recorded sessions, come and give me a shout and we'll go over things a little bit more. So firstly, it is, how do you deal with unhelpful beliefs? You know, we're speaking about bubbles, values, beliefs, needs and wants. How do you deal with it when someone has a belief about you, a belief about your department, a belief about your organization, a belief about anything that is actually wrong in your bubble or unhelpful? How do you deal with it? Well, beliefs are actually quite difficult. And sometimes I'm asked, what are the ninja mind tricks you use to make people change their mind? And there isn't such a thing. You can never get someone to change their mind. I can never make you change your mind. I can't use some tricks that make any of you change your mind in the same way as you can't use ones to make me change my mind. Influence and changing minds is all about the person almost accepting, giving permission for that change to happen. So if I have to try and change, you know, if I think what you believe in is unhelpful, somehow I have to find giving you the space and the dignity and valid argument, and then let you have that time to change your own mind. Just think of something that you believe in, folks. What would it take for that to change? It'll certainly not be somebody going, you need to change your mind because here's my evidence. Here's how I see it, change it. It might actually make you more determined to hold your belief. And I think a good example that most of us have experienced at some point during COVID is this vaccinate or non-vaccinate. And I think many of us have been either on the periphery or right in the midst of maybe conversations with people who are very strong about vaccinate, and other people who are going, don't vaccinate. And when it came to the children's side of it, it's even more difficult. You know, people are saying, yeah, vaccinate the kids, and people are, no, they don't need vaccinated. And there's strong beliefs motivating these opinions. So how do we deal with it? How do we deal with it when we really feel it would be helpful if somebody saw things your way? Well, there's only one tactic that we ever felt found was helpful in trying to encourage someone to change a belief. Most beliefs are changed through experience. If you change the way you believe about something, it's usually because you've experienced something that then allows you, that really has a significant, impact, and allows you to see things differently. It maybe even forces you into it. And again, if we use COVID, because it's a dead easy example here, what did we believe about the ways of working and the ways of living pre-COVID? That our experiences now have opened opportunities, or, you might like or dislike them, but even the way that we work now, that hybrid working that's coming in, that would never even have been considered before. Certain things that you think, oh, okay, because you've experienced it, you may have a different belief. Me included, I would never have believed I could have delivered masterclasses online. I was always in person because I felt that was the best communication. And now here I am actually doing the majority of my work online. And it's a belief that changed. And then where did I originally have that deep-seated belief before? Was my bubble. All my life, all my experiences made me believe that thing. So I'd like to show you a film clip. Does anyone remember the thing about, is it a cream dress or a white dress with gold or a blue dress with black? And this actually, it was stemmed from the Scottish Islands, and it was a girl who was being married, and her mum sent her a photograph of the mother of the bride dress that she'd chosen. And I think the conversation went something like, well, I like the dress, Mum, but I don't really see you as a cream and gold person. She said, well, that's because it's blue and black. And that was the catalyst. Now, what we then learned is that the colour of this dress is true to everyone, but the way the light shines on it helps you see it one way, and also the rods and cones formation within your eyes. Some people will see it in a particular way and some people will see it in another way. That's a belief. When you see this dress, you will believe that it's a certain colour. When someone else sees it, they may believe it's a different colour. This film clip is just a compilation of a few different reactions to the dress, and have a look at how we deal with that when someone challenges a belief. I put it this way, there's not a lot of appropriate curiosity. little look.
Last week, a picture of a dress was posted on Tumblr. Millions of people from all over the world saw it, and now it's being called the dress that broke the internet. Take a look.
It's the question that divided the internet, indeed divided this great nation. Now time for the great debate. What color is this dress?
It's clearly gold and white.
Black and blue.
It's totally white and gold.
There's nothing white or gold about it.
It's blue and black.
Yeah.
Not blue and black. This dress is white and gold.
Dad, on my mum's life, I saw white and gold. White and gold or blue and black? Anna Kendrick joining the debate, tweeting, "If that's not white and gold, the universe is falling apart."
It's blue. It's obviously blue.
I cannot see blue anywhere in that dress. I don't even know how you could see blue.
It's all coming at me fast.
It's a fact that you're smarter if you see it in black and blue.
You are seeing white and gold. Where are you looking at?
I just changed to white and gold!
Wait, no, you're kidding.
So there we have a whole load of folk who see it a particular way, and you can see the reactions when somebody challenges it. Becomes quite animated. This dress is blue and black. And then the extreme comments, you know, if this isn't gold and white, then the universe is falling apart. It's just the emphasis of how strong someone feels about it. And then the little guy at the end, you're smarter if you see it in blue and black. It's a fact, he says. Well, I wonder what color he saw it in. You know, so there's two things. We don't know whether he really believes that, but for the purpose of this exercise, we'll say he does. Imagine he really believes that the color of the dress you see is completely directed, you know, by your intellect. Well, how do we deal with that? That's not helpful. How are we going to change his belief? Again, it's not going to be by saying, well, you're wrong because here's the evidence. They'll just find other evidence that counteracts that. So firstly, there's two things. One, think to yourself, what is the benefit for that person to hold this belief? Because it might actually be, it's just stemmed from something innocuous, and now there's a real benefit for them to hold on to this. Is there a benefit for people to believe certain things about you, your department, your organization, that allows them to behave in a particular way or say a particular way, that if that belief didn't stand, it would completely undermine their argument? So number one, is there a value? And we think for this little guy who's saying, okay, it's a fact that you're smarter if you see it in blue and black. What's the benefit to him? Okay, he is considered smart. He gets other people around him going, yeah, I'm smart too. He gets a tribe around him. So the benefit, and I'm only making sense of this from my own bubble. I might be wrong. I'd have to check the understanding with him. But I do believe that it's so he can have people on his side. He can feel that he's amongst like-minded people and that there's a degree of empowerment, there's a degree of status, and that, yeah, he can be considered smart. So there's a big benefit for him to believe that. So how do I deal with it? Well, we become a 3-year-old child. A 3-year-old child who goes, really? How come? Why, but why, but why? And while we're never encouraged to go to the 7th layer of why someone ticks, we are encouraged with a belief that's unhelpful to take it back, that particular thing, take it back as far as it needs to go. And we would, again, we'll use the chat with the belief and say, okay, first of all, we would state the facts, the information. You're telling me that it's a fact that you're smarter if you see it in blue and black. That's almost a direct lift from what he said. And he's going to go, yeah, because that's the information he's given out. Or he might go, no, that's not quite what I said. Oh, well, it's what I thought I heard. Can you repeat it, please? So you're checking your understanding at each layer as well. Yeah, you're smarter if you see it in blue and black. That's one layer. Can you tell me where you saw that? I'm being open and honest. I see it as white, I see it as gold and cream, and I don't think I'm stupid. So I would really love to know where that's coming from. Can you help me with it? So I've actually, open and honest is values that most people want. So if you build your curiosity around something like that, look, I'm being open, I'm being honest, I'm just trying to work this out, I'm really keen. Then it's not a negative challenge, it is a curious interest to know where he saw that. And what will happen, he may say, oh, I saw it on the internet. It was a really good document. I saw it on the internet. Do you mind me, I'd love to read that document as well. And maybe we could read it together, in fact. And what you do is you take it back to the point where it's the source of the belief, or it's to the point where they don't know where it came from. And that's actually the case with quite a lot of our beliefs. If we actually go back, we don't know where they sourced from, especially ones that maybe we've had from childhood. Well, I actually don't know where that came from. I have no idea. So by taking it back to the source, he might actually come up with some very smart paper that said, actually, it's not just the rods and cones in your eyes, it is to do with your intellect and your IQ score, and here's the evidence. Well, taking it back is an advantage because I'm getting new information that might allow me to change my mind. But actually, I doubt he's going to find much. And if we take it back to the point where he really cannot say with credibility why he has that belief, that is the time to stop. Because one thing that will be unhelpful is going, told you so. Your belief is built on rubbish. Well, they'll become defensive at that point. So the art is taking a belief back to the point where they go, I'm not too sure, actually. Or you can see there's fog language or vague language, which is to redirect you away. As soon as someone uses fog language, vague language, they don't want you to follow the line that you're on. You know that you're on a good trajectory because they're trying to divert you off it. That's the thing. So I suspect there would probably be fog or vague language from him, but you never know. Anyway, take any belief. When you get back to either the source or the point where it becomes a little bit woolly, we have to give people dignity. We have to say something like, okay, there's actually quite a lot on what we've discussed. And I think that's probably given us all questions to think about. Let's leave that for now and come back to it maybe in a couple of days. Or how about we pick this conversation up tomorrow again? I think there's a lot in there to think about. Because imagine a deep-seated belief that you've had for a long time. You've invested in that belief. You've taught on that belief. And suddenly there's a question over it, a credible question. We all need time and space to consider and digest that in ourselves. That's where the belief change might happen. When I think of it in my terms, someone's allowed me to see it through a lens I'm familiar with, but with different information there, curiosity. Then you can only hope. But it's at that point that you might come back the next day and say, well, look, new information that I have says this. Do you think that's worth looking at? Always presenting it in question form so that it leaves people open to make choices. This is the best you can do. It's not going to work with everyone all the time. You get people who are closed and just will not entertain it, but you're not going to change their mind anyway. But the best you can do is go back to that point. Now, even if they think, okay, my belief isn't built on anything very strong and I want to change it, that's only half the matter. Because then we have to find a dignified way for someone to openly change their belief. They might change it, but they can't be seen to change it. And that comes from a strong culture of it's not always seen as good to change our minds. Just look at politics. As soon as a party changes something, it doesn't matter that the world's changed place, and that things have changed. As soon as a political party changes its mind, everybody jumps on from the other side to say they're doing a U-turn, they're not to be trusted. It's used in spin, it's used to manipulate. If we've got somebody we don't like that changes their mind, we end up using that as another tool to make people disbelieve them or take away their credibility. So within negotiation, even if we had the joy of someone, that light bulb moment going on and someone seeing it a different way, we then had to help them find a route. Quite often it was new information's come to light with this new perspective. What would you think? Is there other things in there that could be considered? And that allows them to go, well, now you mention that, yeah, it makes sense. So now that new information's come to light, I think differently. That's a dignified out. I'm just going to touch on suicide intervention because this is where we used it in the main. We would persuade someone that maybe jumping wasn't a good idea, and we would see that happening and they'd agree with it. But they then needed something extra to allow them to come back from that edge because they'd invested time and effort, they'd planned it all, and they had credibility to live up to, a person of their word. And we had to work really hard at saying, okay, now how do we come back from there? No one's going to know about this, so you're okay. We're not going to tell anyone. That's helpful. It means that they don't have to think about their reputation elsewhere. Or we might say, we know that if this was completely down to you, you could make any decision you want, but it's not. It's your family and it's a responsibility. And if it wasn't for your family, you know, you're free to do what you want. You're right. You're right. Because of my family, I'll come back. So we always had to work on that. So there you go, folks. When it comes to a strong belief, proportionality, do you take it, if it's really an unhelpful one that's undermining a lot of things you do, then do what you can to be curious and take it back to its source or the point that's worth exploring. You might actually think that's just that takes too much time. I'm going to absorb that. I'm just going to park it and I can live with them believing that. It doesn't matter. We'll work around it. I was working with a group yesterday and they were saying, people come to us and they really believe we are not going to be impartial. And do you argue that to prove it? Do you explore it by taking back the layers, or do you absorb it? And there was definitely a strategy about, well, absorb it and then work away on the stuff, and their experience of working with you will then tell them that their belief is no longer founded, is no longer strong. But they've had the time and the space to work that out themselves without you coming into the party and trying to defend yourself. And as soon as somebody becomes defensive, it actually becomes more than it needs to be sometimes. It's two sometimes in a row there. That's probably one of my words that's annoying you. I apologize now. So there you have it. You have beliefs unhelpful. There has to be a strategy how to deal with them, and it won't work every time, but it's worth having a go. Thoughts on that one, folks? I highlight this because it was one of the most difficult things for us. And I can't say that we've got a big bag of tricks. We just have a couple of tactics. And if you can get someone into a conversation about, well, sometimes we have beliefs because they suit us. Do you think that's possible here, that we all have our beliefs because it fits our agendas? Is that something that's happening? Talk about it in a general way and keep ourselves in there as well, recognizing that we all have beliefs on the subject. Are they worth talking about? Because maybe we're not being fair to ourselves and opening our minds to different options. So there's different ways of bringing that to the fore. There we go. Hope there's something in there that's helpful, folks, on that one. Try it on yourself before you try it on anybody else. Think of a belief you have and then go back and work out, where did that belief come from? If you become a bit, if you're not very good at self-analysis, if it worries you and chews you up a bit, don't do this. But if you can go back and think, okay, where did that belief come from then? Sometimes it's just down to, well, I don't know where it came from, but I have faith that it's the right thing. That's okay. Sorted. I have a few examples, but I'm conscious of time. Another one is timing, and this is another film clip that I'm going to have for you. And this fits into some of the questions. When, folks, is the right time to talk, the right time to listen, the right time to move a conversation forward, or to introduce your agenda or your ideas? Well, emotion is the barometer for this again. So use emotion. And it is the time, if emotion is high, that's our time to listen. We know that one. When we get the seesaw down here, that's the time to talk, because there's a willingness. Ears are open and we can chat back and forward. And of course, we have tactics we can use. We can use that appropriate curiosity, explore layers. We can have a conversation that moves. We can direct it to certain things. And we understand how people tick when they become emotional. We can use core emotional concerns to help fill the buckets so that that seesaw remains there. And then we talk things through, and then you think, okay, it's my turn to put my agenda. How do I do it? And again, this is something we really had to bring in as something to teach negotiators, because when they were negotiating, they actually got to the point where they were quite skillful at managing people's emotion, reading them, listening to understand, and then having conversations. But there was a little hurdle that they just couldn't get. Now, how do we move it forward to us? And we could find ourselves going round in circles. So here's the thing. Now, this is most of what I coach is built on a lot of psychology academia. This one is just our discovery. And it's so important because timing and communication is one of the most underestimated important elements. So if I go back onto the PowerPoint, timing. Before you move a conversation forward, ask yourself, does the other person know that I have captured, everything, as in, do they feel heard, understood, respected? Do they know I've captured the stuff? Do they know I sense their emotion? Do they know that I've captured what's really important to them, their values, beliefs, needs, and wants? If the answer is no, they can't actually know that I've, picked everything up because I've never told them. I've never reflected back to them. Then we have to turn that no into a yes. And then the next one is their emotion now a place where they're going to hear me? Because they might get everything off their chest. You might show that you've heard them, and there'll be something that allows them to continue on a high emotion. And then we have a tactic. We label the emotion, we listen to understand. When we get the balance of the seesaw back down, we can then say yes to that thing. So yes to both, then you can move your conversation forward. And one of the ways of getting them to that is that little listening package, the 3 things. They can't help but know that you've heard them if you can reflect back bits. So I'd like to show a film. This one, there's a girl with an issue. Okay, she's got a problem. And the guy that's with her has a solution. And it's a good solution because she has a nail stuck in her head, and this nail is causing her a whole load of problems. What do you think the solution would be? Louise, what would you do? Somebody's got a nail in their head, it's causing them an awful lot of problems. What would you suggest a solution would be?
I'm nodding because I know the clip, Cathy.
Yeah, good.
So yeah, what would you do if they had a nail? Yes, solution to take it out.
Absolutely. Or as some people say, get a hammer, hammer that in. But yeah, get rid of the nail and that's the solution, and it's absolutely accurate. But what we have here is, well, it didn't work. The guy's given her really good advice, so why didn't it work? Number one, he's a bit clumsy with his words that make her feel that she's been told what to do. But the big thing is timing. If we give the right advice at the wrong time, it's the wrong advice. Have a look at this, see what you think. It is used quite often, this clip, so I'm not surprised, Louise. It's usually used in the context of listening, and I like to try it on the timing. See what you think.
It's just, there's all this pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have...
So there we have it. Yeah, she has a nail in her head. He's got a really good idea. Take the nail out. It would solve her problem. It'd save her, having all these hassles with her jerseys and things. All that was wrongly placed there was the timing and a little bit of dialogue, but the timing. So think of it, if he'd actually, and he did a little bit, what was the part that it began to fall into the right, the right place? Helen, thoughts on that? Was there a point in that film clip that you thought, okay, he's doing better here?
About well, after she said she just never listened, he realized that she didn't want him to fix it. So he sat back and you could tell he was sort of biting his tongue. I'm not going to mention the nail again.
He did. And you're right. And he just went, that sounds tough. If you think of it, he's labeled the emotion. He's taken an emotional part out of these three things. It doesn't always have to be verbal. It can actually just be an action that you can match somebody's emotion as well, just to show that you've picked it up. But yeah, he's going, that must be tough. It is. Oh, our seesaw came down. Bingo. So if we take these three bubbles and information, emotion, and values, beliefs, needs, and wants, I mean, it could be something as simple as you sound confused, you just want a good night's sleep, and there's something stopping you. That's what I'm picking up. And that would sort of say, yeah, you're right, that's exactly it. Just being able to show that you picked up the key points. He then can move it on because the emotion comes down. So what do we do? Well, I think you highlighted something really important, Helen, which was, well, actually, she just wanted to be heard. How many of us actually want someone else to sort our problems? We sometimes just want to be heard. And I think that's difficult for people sometimes if you're venting. And I'm going to share one client actually that this was a really pivotal and helpful film clip for. He was married to a girl who was a school teacher, and she didn't feel that she fitted in at the school. She felt it was a toxic environment, and one of these ones where she says if you go into the staff room, the chat stops. And she just was having a horrible time. And the guy said she came home every night saying, I hate that place. I hate that place. Oh, I've had a terrible day. There'd be tears. And he said, what do you think his solution was? What do you think his suggestion was? Anyone? Lorraine? I saw you speaking there, but
I don't know, new job, change of career.
That's it. That's it. And that would be a good solution, wouldn't it? Just leave your work, go find a new job. And he said that went on often to the point where he was getting so annoyed, and he'd go, look, I can provide for us both, just go and find a new job. And he said, I was actually getting irritated by her because she just wouldn't do what I told her. And when I did this film clip, he actually dropped me a message and he said, that was a light bulb moment. He said, I've just realized I'm just someone else telling her what to do. And that's autonomy bucket being emptied. And he says she's having a tough time at school. She comes home and I've never realized I'm giving a solution and I'm telling her what to do. And I'm not actually saying that I understand it. And I'm not even saying I'm trying to understand it. And he said, so on the back of that film clip, he said, when she came home, I actually had a glass of wine. There's the wine again. This is wine day. He had a glass of wine waiting on her and just said, okay, let's sit properly and talk this through. What's going on? How do you feel? It must be tough. What's it like every day? And she, for the first time, she actually felt heard, understood, respected. She had nobody at school that she could talk to that way. When she was coming home, she was getting the same sort of, solution. And that was it. And he said, I didn't tell her what to do. I just said, basically, what do you want to do about it? What do you think we'll do? And that comes back to the problem-solving frame of mind. If you encourage the other person, as soon as we tell people what to do, it can feel that the autonomy bucket is being emptied. Even though they've come with a problem, they're not always looking for a solution. They're just looking to be heard. And about 3 months later, she left her job and got a new one, just of her own volition. And he was very kind coming back and saying that film clip opened my eyes. So it was just one of these things, especially if time is against us, we can actually jump into problem solving mode quite quickly. Now, it might be someone comes and says, look, this has happened. I just need a solution. Tell me what to do. Well, that's sort of okay. They're almost giving permission to be told. But if they're not, and they come with an issue that they're emotional about, there's a big chunk to be done about listening to understand. And then how do you move the conversation on? Well, our guy here, we'll call her Sophie. I'm suggesting that he maybe lets Sophie know that he's heard her. And then he just says, what do you think would help? Now, we can do that. We can encourage people to have a problem-solving frame of mind. But do we have anyone in our lives where you think they like this chase? They don't want a solution because they want to keep going round in circles with this. And that is one of the things that being heard properly is a really appealing thing. It can actually be quite sexy, actually, on a different context. But in business, it can be a really helpful thing. And it brings people together. And if you've got someone who listens to you, you'll want to hang around them. And therefore, if the problem's solved, they won't get that level of listening. So if you ever find that you're going round in circles with someone, you're asking them to think of a solution and they're telling you that nothing works, then you can give yours. But here's a suggestion how to offer it. And it's through a question. We'd say what you see, and offer a solution. So we could say, look, I can see you're sitting opposite me, your head in your hands, you're crying, and there's something really obvious to me that I think might work. Can I share what that is? So ask permission to offer a solution. And most people will say, yeah, I'd like to hear what you have. Well, my thought is if you did this, this, and this, it would work. So if you ask permission, that fulfills the autonomy. It saves someone feeling that they're being told what to do with it. What you need to do is this, or what you should do is that, or you have to get a grip of such and such. These shoulds, musts, have tos can really rile people. So if we can use questions as an alternative, that can be quite helpful too. So there we go, listening to understand and how to move a conversation on. That's one of the things. Okay. Are we doing okay, folks? This is a little bit of front loading with the tactics. Yeah, 20 minutes. Let's get through just a couple of others. The next one is this, spontaneous or planned. There are only two types of conversation, and they're spontaneous or they're planned. Spontaneity always brings emotion. So these corridor conversations we spoke about, where you're minding your own business, you've got your own agenda, you have your to-do list, and somebody grabs you in the corridor and said, oh, I have to offload this. You cannot help yourself have an emotional reaction to that. It's unexpected. So it can only ever be emotional. Then there's the planned stuff. So Alison, we're going to have a complete change round of how the office works. Could we meet maybe on Thursday to have a proper chat about it? We're going to have to talk about the logistics. We're going to have to talk about the communication. We're going to have to talk about bringing people on side with it. Can we meet on Thursday? Is that fair, Alison, that that's a planned meeting?
Happy with that.
Yeah. And when we both go into that meeting, we'll both have thought about it and we'll be coming with our own agendas. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair.
And we would call that instrumental. There's levers, there's things to be done, and we have that plan. Now, this is not to say within planned meetings that there are spontaneous moments of emotion. That's going to be normal. But the planned is planned, emotion is emotion, and when planned meets planned and emotion meets emotion, actually it sort of balances out okay. It's when spontaneous meets planned that it gets a little bit awkward. So Alison, if I've been thinking about something for the last month and I've got all my ducks in a row, I've really worked this out, and I say to you, right, Alison, I really need this, and this done, and it has to be done by Tuesday, and here's a few things about it. And you'll go, what? Tuesday? That is unrealistic. Well, I've thought it through, and this. Well, what they have is a planned, balanced, logical mind speaking to someone who has new information, it's been landed on them, and is now emotional. These don't work very well. So if you ever find yourself, oops, I'm going to come to a bunch of fives in a minute. If you ever find yourself being caught on the back foot, that corridor moment, then do what you need to give yourself time and space to regain your thoughts. Now, you might only need a few seconds to do so, but if you can say, well, even something like, I get the feeling you've been thinking about this for a while. This is completely new to me. So give me just a bit of space. Send me the information and I'll think about, it, and then we'll have more of a meaningful conversation. If you're pushed into it, saying, no, I really need an opinion and an answer from you today, then make sure that person knows that they're having a spontaneous answer that you would maybe change if you had time to consider it. So you're just saying, look, you're pushing me into an answer. You're going to get one that's emotionally fueled. You're going to get one that might not actually be very good for you. If you're asking me right now, I'll give you an answer, but it's not one that is probably going to be helpful. So give yourself a bit of time and encourage the other person to allow you a bit of time if you ever feel that it's that mismanaged. And again, if you are on the other end where you are going to spring something on someone that you've been thinking about for a while, remember that their reaction can only be emotional, and being able to give them a bit of space to think over it is helpful. Now, we would recognize in negotiation that this is not helpful for us. And we had a tactic called a bunch of fives. Now, I've actually done a whole page on that in your workbook to try and help you build up how we would create a bunch of fives, but I'm going to go over it on here, which is, I'll take, for example, one of the more extreme cases. Say we have a kidnap. So we're said, Lorraine, somebody's kidnapped you. Okay. Will we make the demand about 5 million? You're worth that, girl. Yeah, why not? So you've been kidnapped, the information comes in, and what's normal with that is that there is communication, there's a demand, there's a threat, and there's a deadline. That is the norm. Okay, do I wait until that call comes in? Do I wait, just wait there, waiting on the call and do nothing between now and then? Because when that call comes in, it's going to be spontaneous. I'm going to get a new threat, a new demand, a new deadline. All of that has the risk of being emotional. And we know that when emotion is at play, our pace, pitch, and tone changes, our word choice changes, our ability and our desire to listen changes, none of which is good if you're a negotiator on the receiving end of a call with a demand. So you can argue, well, we record stuff, of course. The recordings are there, but that's not what we're speaking about in terms of communication. We don't all have that luxury. So what we'd say is we don't wait until that demand comes in. We start anticipating what might be said, anticipating what might be threatened, and we will at that moment build up a bunch of fives, which is 5 different ways to react, 5 different ways to respond, and we'll practice it with our colleagues. None of this is role play, folks. We know people hate role play. This is practicing. If you know you have a difficult conversation coming up with someone, get someone that you really, really trust and say, look, can you just imagine you're that person and I want to practice some dialogue. Tell me how it works. How does it land? And by practicing that, when the call comes in for Lorraine, it feels like I'm prepared for it. I've already been there. So it allows my emotion to stay balanced, for my brain to think logically and to deliver the message that I think is valuable. So how can we take that into business? Well, what are the things that you can reasonably expect will happen? What conversations can you expect will come your way from the role that you have and the position you hold that would make you, take a step back, would give you that emotional knot in your tummy? Why not think about them now? Think about now so that you can respond in a more considered way. And that becomes a bunch of fives. We call it a bunch of fives because it's quite a good name. That was it. Sometimes we have 3 responses, sometimes we have 7, but we'd aim for 5. And I have an example. And I brought one that is nothing to do with negotiation. Well, it is to do with negotiation and communication because it's about speaking. But I thought this would be quite a good one, to show. And again, this is in your workbook, and I think there's also example about if you feel somebody is deliberately going to undermine you at a meeting. So this isn't somebody just going in with a reaction, somebody genuinely not listening. It's somebody going in and manipulating a meeting. So that's in your book as well. And that's based on a factual one I had from a client that gave me permission to use it. This one, however, is maybe you've not had someone over talking you, but you can reasonably expect at some point in your career, someone is not going to listen and they're going to over talk. So why wait for that to happen? How do you deal with it? Let's come up with a bunch of fives of what you can say and do so that it doesn't become awkward at the time. So this is just a few examples. Imagine, Lorraine, we'll stay with yourself, that we're in conversation and you keep, what you've got to say is so important and you keep over talking. I might come up and say, okay, Lorraine, I think we've both got a few things to talk about here, right? How about we take it in turns? You go first. There's always a strategic benefit from allowing the other person to talk first because they will tell you all the clues. You'll be able to listen to them for the bubbles. So how about you go first? I will find the things that I can connect on. I can find the things that I can ask and be appropriately curious about. I can use the things to become a good communicator. I find it difficult to hear when we both talk. Look, I'll listen first. How's that? And so on and so forth, just different ways. So think about what you're going to encounter that would make you apprehensive. It might be giving feedback to a member of staff. It could be someone that you have to go through discipline with. Think in advance, plan that so that you can come up, and that helps you keep your own emotion a bit in check. So that's a really handy tactic that we used a lot. Anything on that one, folks? See it being a benefit at all? Something we did in our team is that we shared a bunch of fives. If we had something that worked really well, to say, look, I've got a good few phrases here that worked well for me in such and such a situation. And I can remember one where we were forced to negotiate over Twitter. That's uncomfortable for everyone involved. And through that, they had a few bunch of fives, you know, reasons that we can come off social media, reasons to go face to face, reasons to move to a phone call. And they said we came up with quite a good few reasons. So that was a good bunch of fives to share with the other negotiators. And I'd look at it and think, well, how can I make that sound like it's coming from me naturally? And I would fine tune it. And we'd have files of the things. So if you know that you've got some good phrases when you're dealing with awkward situations that might benefit your colleagues, then, you know, feel free to share them. It might not be an open book for everyone, but it might be close, you know, if you work closely together and you have trust amongst folk, that it could be quite good. Now, there's a thought that, well, what happens when you do this with someone who understands what you're doing? Well, it's a benefit. I'm sometimes asked, when negotiators speak and you use your bunch of fives and you use your core emotional concerns and you use this tactic, is it like, you know, people having a 3D game of chess, you're trying to catch each other out? Well, no, it's actually fabulous because we understand the rules of engagement. We understand how communication works. And even when you're on the receiving end of it, it's actually quite good. It's good to know that someone is capturing what you're saying. It's good to know that someone's going to that effort. So even though everyone understands this stuff and they think, wait a minute, you're using a bunch of fives on me, take it as a compliment that someone's actually considered a good way of communicating. So there we go with bunch of fives. And there was just two more things. One is, and I'm conscious of time here, iMessages. If you think of how often in a day we use the word you, we, and I, yet each of these words bring very distinctive responses. And that's because the word you is as good as using someone's name, and it becomes very personal. So you are the bee's knees, you know what, who have I not spoken with that's really, Louise, Anita, Linda, we've not spoken that much today. Oh no, there was a little, oh no, I assessed that, oh no.
Not at all, no.
So Linda, you are the best, you are the bee's knees, you come and work early, you deal with all these horrible filing trays, I just love working with you. You are the best. How do you feel?
I feel great and appreciate it.
Brilliant. Yeah. And that's what comes from a you message. But what happens when Linda actually comes in late and she never deals with a filing tray and she leaves coffee cups in the sink and really it doesn't feel like she's really a team player? How do I mention that? How do I bring it up? Well, do I leave it? Well, no, I can't, because it's actually impacting on the team. It's impacting on me. Do I mention it? Yeah. Now, what's going to happen when I say you're in late? You never take your share of the filing. You leave coffee cups in the sink. You. A negative you message means, Linda, you're probably going to fight or flight. You're going to, what do you mean? I'm busy as anybody. You don't understand what it's like. We end up with a little bit of conflict. Or Linda, you might just go, I'm out of here.
Feel targeted. What about all that leave their dishes in the sink? Yeah, it's not just me.
Yeah. So we become defensive. We feel targeted, unfairly so. So negative you messages seldom bring you any benefits. But does it mean I can't touch on this stuff? No. So that's when we turn it into an I message. I, when, because. And it would be, Linda, I'm finding it really difficult first thing in the morning when I have to deal with all the first calls, I deal with all the filing trays, and there's always coffee cups left for me. And I just feel that it's all landing on my responsibility. We both should be here at 9 o'clock to share the burden. Can we talk about that, please? So would you feel that you could probably have a conversation more readily about that?
Yeah, it feels, as I say, less targeted about me, but more about everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah. And an I message forces the other person to see it from an I perspective. And the good thing is no one can argue with an I message, because this is how I feel. I'm finding it really difficult in the morning when all the filing trays are needing done, when the calls are coming in and I'm on my own with this. And I feel just a bit, you know, leaned on and taken a loan off. Can we talk about all of this? Because I think, you know, there's something to be sorted out here. And when you give an I message or a we message, folk are more likely to give their opinions and contribute. And then you can start that conversation back and forward. So the benefit of an I message over a you message when it's negative. The we message is, yeah, how can we sort this out? How can we work together on this? A typical negotiator solution is separate the person from the problem altogether. Folks, can we talk please about filing trays, coffee cups, and the busyness we have at the start of the day? I'm needing a bit of help with this. So you talk about the thing, and it allows most people to look at it and talk around it. And time. Oh, 4 minutes. And really that, I suppose if we finish on that one, there was a couple of things. Well, no, let me just one more little thing that I think will be helpful. And it's a tactic we call signposting. When you feel something will be misinterpreted, either deliberately or perhaps on an email, or there's days where your words just don't flow, you can signpost your intention so that it doesn't get misinterpreted. It's the same as you do when you have an out of office reply on your email. You're not allowing someone to make sense of silence. You're actually saying to them, I'm out in the office, I'll come back to you when I'm back at my desk. If it's urgent, go elsewhere. So you're not letting that silence grow into something that it doesn't have to be. Imagine if you didn't put that out of email on, you sent a message and there was no reply. Folk would make sense of the silence the way that they want it. So signpost it, signpost your intention. So it might be, Lorraine, I just can't find my words today, but you know, what I'm about to say comes from a good place. I'm just being open and honest. And that almost gives me the green light to be quite candid with what I say, and for you to know that the intention is honorable. Any of you received an email with like tons of information on it? And you just go, oh. Imagine a signpost at the top that said, there's a lot in this email. I know you're busy. It's for your reference, so don't feel you need to read it all. Oh, there's the intention behind the email is detailed. And this is handy on emails. And there's a lot on the questions about emails. It was quite handy because you can make up for the missing emotion and any misinterpretation that just the written word will create. So I think we're there with that. Now, as always, the same as last week, although we finish at 12 officially, I'm staying on for an extra half hour for anyone who wants to ask any specific questions. The recording will go off. If there's anything within the workbook, there's more slides in the workbook than we ever touched on, deliberately so. If there's anything in that workbook that you ever want to ask about, if there's any of the challenges we spoke right at the beginning that you want to go over again, and I'll just bring them back up on the screen. Let's find them. There we go. If there's anything in here that you feel there are still gaps on, I think there's stuff in the 2 days we've spoken about that will touch on every one of them. But if you feel there are still gaps that haven't been addressed, then either the next half hour we can touch on them, or if you've not got that freedom or you're watching this on record, then just give me a shout and we can jump on a call and fill those gaps for you. So on that note, with 1 minute to go, I'm going to say for anyone that needs to go, well, thank you very much for coming in, for being here, for being involved and listening, actually, because I realized today's been a bit more talky than interactive. So thank you very much for your time and your patience. And really, that's us. Anita, all okay?
Yes, thank you so much, Cathy. I
know I have been furiously scribbling down some little nuggets of what you've said, and also having the aid memoir that you've sent is just going to be invaluable just to go back to. I suppose I was just wondering, I don't know if anybody else on the call is the same, how do we kind of practice some of these things? They just are such fabulous tips, but I know in the moment I would find it hard to implement some of them. So how can we, if you have any tips around how we actually practice them so that they become a little bit of habit? Because as you were mentioning earlier, so many of our communication styles are habit. So how do we develop these great habits?
I would say find what are the challenges you have and what are the solutions you think out of everything we've spoken about over the 2 sessions. What are the things that you can use that you think might actually be helpful? And then go and take them and practice them. Practice them at home, practice them socially, make fun out for them. Maybe catch a buddy in the office and say, right, see the next 10 minutes, can we come up with maybe a bunch of 5s? Can I practice some iMessages on you? And the practice is, and the joy in it, realizing that it really is something that you can use as a solution will give you the motivation. And then the practice will give you the confidence that you can actually use it. Then once you feel comfortable, you might feel you can move it into the real situations, consciously so. But I would say one bite at a time. To do everything we've talked about would be almost impossible. So just take the ones that you think relate most to you and that you can use. And then once you have them in place, go and do another one. And even listening with your shopping list, conversations that you have no part in. Just sit there and listen. You have CPD and permission, CPD requirements and permission to listen to other people's conversations. Just sit and think, okay, what's this really about? If I was to reflect back here, what would the key points and how would I do it? Would I tell them that I've picked up the emotion, or would my reaction tell them I picked up their emotion? And just play around with that a little bit. So I think that's the best I can do. In negotiation world, we have them, our students captive for 2 weeks, and we have exercises, and they practice and practice and practice, but they still go away having to fine tune. And we encourage them, find a reason every day to practice a skill, because it's the same as any other skill. If you don't use it, it'll become rusty. In the supermarket, this is the best place. Supermarket, when these the queues are busy and the moments are boring, and you have some poor person who has been going beep, beep, beep all day, and they are forced into commenting on your aubergines or your whatever it is that you have, because they're told that they have to comment on people's shopping to make them feel included. And oh, I've never seen these crisps before. Really? They're golden wonder. They've been around for decades. You get that fake sort of involvement. Practice there. And just start a conversation with the checkout person. One, you're going to lift their day because they're getting something more interesting than, oh, you're having a busy day. But just say, okay, wow, this is a cold spot of the shop that they've put you in. Oof, are you not needing a jersey? Just something to start a conversation. And in your head, think, okay, I'm going to listen to what they say. I'm going to listen for the information. I'm going to listen for that. And whatever you do is going to be really welcomed and beneficial. Of course, you'll pick up, there'll be people that don't want to speak. Don't force a conversation. But in the main, that's where I do my stuff. Every time I'm in, I'll do a point of practicing something. Sometimes I give myself a task. By the time my shopping goes through, I want to have achieved this. I wonder if I can find out what their best holiday ever is without asking them about their best holiday. Just little things to play around with my head with and make it fun. So there's a couple of ideas. I think you might be able to use something there anytime.
Yes, thank you. That's great. I'm sure, has anybody else got any questions for Cathy?
Right, so what I'll do is I'll pop the recording off now, so we're free to completely chat. And thanks to everyone who's been listening in on record.